Technology has shaped the human experience. From stone axes to supercomputers, we've always made tools to improve and simplify our lives. However, quite often these means to improve our lives also complicate them in equal measure. Such is the case for artificial intelligence in the universe of Star Citizen, where AI has led to nothing but disaster. My name is Paul Shelley, and you're watching Galactic Historian, a show where I take a look at the lore and history of sci-fi universes. Today, we'll be discussing the dark past of artificial intelligence in the Star Citizen universe. But before we can discuss AI in Star Citizen, we need to understand what AI really means and its classification. Now, the topic of AI covers a lot of ground, from science to engineering and even philosophy. However, for simplicity's sake, we're going to focus on the basic types and classifications of AI in order to form a baseline. The three types of AI are narrow, general, and superintelligent. Narrow is the kind of AI we have today in the real world, machine learning and expert systems, which are generally good at one task. In fact, the video you're watching right now was likely suggested to you by a narrow AI in the form of YouTube's own systems. General intelligence is AI that is roughly as smart as a human. This is still a distant goal today, but is seen frequently in most sci-fi universes. Finally, superintelligent AI is an AI that far surpasses human intelligence as we know it, being better at everything in every field of intelligence. It's important to note that these are levels of intelligence, not sapience or how human they are. Again, there is a lot of psychology, philosophy, and more to discuss in the world of AI, which we don't have time to touch on. And given the limited sources explaining AI in the Star Citizen verse, it is better to limit the discussion to the AI's intelligence levels and therefore abilities. With that understanding, let's discuss the history of AI in the Star Citizen universe. The earliest reference to AI is in the form of the Tokyo Lemming car incident of 2044. While it's not explicitly spelled out, the type and nature of this AI seems to be of at least an advanced expert system, not too dissimilar to what we have now. As the name suggests, the Lemming car incident caused many deaths as a result of this AI being installed likely into an automated traffic system that controlled cars in Tokyo, Japan. Needless to say, this gave AI a bad name, as the incident is seen as the first ever major AI disaster. However, humanity continued to tinker with artificial intelligence, and by 2125, AI was trusted enough for one to be placed at the head of the Mars terraforming project. Again, it isn't clear as to what type of AI this was, but evidence suggests that it might have been one of the first general intelligence AIs, as it was set with the task of calculating and coordinating the entire terraforming project to speed up the process. This seemed to work spectacularly, as by the later stages of the process, not a single member of the terraforming teams were wearing any protective equipment. The air was clean, and the pressure was safe for Earth-based life. However, the day before the process was going to be announced as completed, a catastrophic reversal occurred, killing the entire planet in minutes as the atmosphere failed. Given the sudden and cataclysmic event, the entire Earth was in shock, the first real setback in human colonization of the solar system since the creation of the quantum engine. After a thorough investigation, it was determined that the process was rushed, and while the AI was not blamed directly for the disaster, there were many who blamed it for the failure. While there's no direct evidence, the sheer speed upon which the entire planet died seems to indicate, to me at least, that the AI was in some way responsible, either through some direct malicious intent, a failure in its own calculations, or some kind of catastrophic change to its abilities. No matter what the answer was, the fact that the second Mars terraforming project did not have any AI support, even though this caused the project to take almost 4 times as long, seems to indicate that even the project leaders and government officials paying for the process had some belief that the AI was a point of failure. Regardless of who was to blame, the incident that sealed the fate of AI and research into the technology came during one of the most ambitious exploration missions in human history. the Artemis project. Artemis was a Chariot-class ship, a massive exploratory and colonization ship built in the early 23rd century by RSI. This was almost 50 years before the discovery of the first jump point and almost a century after the completion of the Mars terraforming project, so just before jump travel became available and long enough for AI engineers to believe they had worked out the kinks of the technology to give it another shot. The ship was fitted with the best quantum engines available and enough equipment and supplies to maintain a crew of 5,000. Most of the crew would be in long-term stasis couches, progenitors to the modern stasis pods, to keep the crew alive during their long voyage to GJ667cc, a super-Earth orbiting a star 24 light-years from Earth. Because the crew had to remain in stasis until they arrived, or they'd have died years before, the Artemis was built with a state-of-the-art AI named Janus to operate the ship during the journey. Janus was, at least, a high-level general intelligence AI, able to make judgment calls and troubleshoot with many different variables. Functionally, it was an incredibly capable human-level intelligence, though lacking in any real personality. When the Artemis launched towards its final destination, there was much fanfare, but only 245 days into the mission, the ship stopped sending back updates, and the Artemis disappeared entirely. Well, not entirely, but the story of the Artemis is for another time. The fact that the AI had been giving mission control constant updates as it journeyed at incredibly high speeds before cutting off communications, with the last updates indicating that everything was nominal, blame was squarely placed on the shoulders of Janus for the mission failure. This was the last straw. With the blood of thousands and uncountable loss of resources, AI was deemed too dangerous a risk to use by the governments and corporations of Earth. Every time AI would reach a point where its creators were sure they worked out the flaws, it critically failed and injured or killed everything around it. And given the resource and manpower cost to build them, it was far too much the risk to continue. This limited AI to expert systems, likely to the same level as early 21st century levels just before the Lemming car incident. This led to the stagnation of technological development. Without the ability to automate much of anything beyond 21st century levels, the vast growing civilization made up of dozens of planets and trillions of humans proved to be a massive hurdle to introduce new technology and have it widely adopted. Because people had to be paid at every stage of development, the price of something like building a new model of ship would require humans to design, build, ship, stock, and sell this ship. This resulted in a very high price, often creating ships well out of the price range of all but the wealthiest individuals. Thus, companies relied on older tech, re-releasing older models with gradually improved designs, as it was cheaper and easier. This is why you have ships designed hundreds of years prior, but still in active service. It's just too pricey to innovate radically. Even as the process became more streamlined and supply lines stabilized over the centuries, this lack of AI assistance meant that technological development was painfully slow. And during the time of the oppressive measure regime, where thinking outside the box could land you in a brutal prison, progress sometimes even regressed. This has left humanity to get by with expert systems like the Intelligent Flight Control System, or IFCS, and nav computers, which are more similar to the fly-by-wire and GPS systems of the late 20th and early 21st century than advanced AI. While these systems are the refined versions of that old tech, they are still firmly old tech. The tragedy of AI development didn't end there, though, as humanity once more tried to meddle with the technology. During the height of the Xi'an Cold War, Aegis and the UE Navy dreamed up a means to send the troops home. They built experimental AI and installed them in Overlord bombers, designed to patrol the Perry Line and act as an automated response in case of the Xi'an incursion. However, predictably, this ended in the tragic Horus incident. During a trial run, the AI believed that the communications it was receiving were compromised. In response, it shut down the comms connection with home base. This then prevented the constant all-clear signal to reach the bombers. As a result, the AI believed that home base was destroyed by a Xi'an attack and started their retaliatory strike. It required fighters to intercept and destroy the multi-billion credit AI before it could trigger a devastating interstellar war. This information only came to the public after the fall of the Measures, but it illustrated that even after centuries of further research, AI was still too unreliable and dangerous to use. However, recently, ArcCorp has been lobbying to remove restrictions on AI development and try once more to rework the problem, a movement that got a major boost from the election of Imperator Addison, who campaigned on restarting AI research. Still, AI remains banned by the UEE, though this increased interest goes to show that humanity will forever be chasing the dream of AI. The question is, will it work, or sacrifice more unfortunate souls on the altar of science? For now, I want to know what you think about the AI problem in Star Citizen. Do you think the UEE will relax its restrictions? Will AI work, or will it kill everyone? Let me know in the comments below. If you really enjoyed what you watched, think about hitting the subscribe button for more lore content like this. This channel is supported by the wonderful patrons like those on screen now. If you too want to help make these videos possible, you can sign up for the link below. Until next time, remember, Ex Historia ad Astra.